think the next step actually is going to be economic ties with Taiwan.
Well, there is going to be trade talks coming up, right?
Yeah, they announced that they were going to do some kind of like trade talks during the like back in June, but this week they announced that they come up with a framework and the talks are actually going to start next month.
Cool.
Yeah. So.
Well, speaking of trade, I think that's a great segue into the fury I feel at the Commerce Department.
Yes.
Shall we get into that one?
Yeah.
So, you know how China is an authoritarian state and there's really no separation between any state-run military industrial complex and any private Chinese company in China?
Well, I mean, there's a separation, but they can take whatever they want.
Yeah, civil military fusion.
They officially have that policy of civil military fusion.
Yep.
And so the way the U.S. has dealt with this is, there's like an entity list. You're not supposed to, there are restrictions on trade with Chinese companies tied to the military, for instance, which, as we just said, is stupid because there's no such thing as a private Chinese company.
Well, there are such things as private Chinese company. I'm just saying that, like,
It's
if the
only on
military
paper.
wants something, they can take it.
They can take it, yeah. So if you give sensitive technology to a private Chinese company that has a military application, the Chinese military can just take it. But anyways, the point is, like, supposedly there were all these, restrictions on U.S. companies trading sensitive technology with China, particularly things that have military applications. Well, apparently I come to find out that all these, like, the entity list restriction, all it means is these U.S. companies just need to get a license from the Commerce Department, and the Commerce Department basically approves everything.
They approved something like 94% in 2020.
Yeah, and like only like a fraction of all the trade that happens between the U.S. and China is even being reviewed.
Well,
by the Commerce
because
Department.
only a fraction needs to be according to the entity list, right? Because there's only like 70 companies on the entity list.
And and this is crazy because according to one Washington D.C. based analytics firm, like there are tens of thousands of Chinese companies that should be on the entity list, but there's only like 70.
Right.
Well,
Whereas
they said could be, like...
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, like it's not necessarily all 10,000, but like there's probably more than 70.
Right,
Yeah.
but there's a corollary to this, which is Iran, where every Iranian company is essentially on the entity list, even though they don't call it that. It's that, like, U.S. companies can't trade with Iranian companies because we have these like full trade restrictions on that whole authoritarian country, and it's similar with North Korea. So, like, it's not a thing that the United States can't do. It's a thing the United States essentially is making an exception for China for the whole country.
And the result is American companies are giving China the sensitive military technology they need.
We're selling it to them.
That's better, Chris.
That's true.
It supports U.S. companies.
We really
in the
are
extreme short term.
U.S.
really are selling the
technological
rope.
leadership.
We really are selling them the rope that they will use to hang us.
I don't know if rope is on the entity list.
It should be.
It's probably a technology that's the other thing
Well,
that
if it was
happens.
a hemp rope, there'd be lots of restrictions on it.
If it's a technology that's deemed old enough, even though it can still be used by military applications, then it doesn't get restricted. In
So
the
like
same
like
way.
a club with nails in it.
Well, I mean, I don't think we're selling that to China,
semiconductors.
but
No,
certain
the-
semiconductors,
yeah.
Certain semiconductors and also equipment used to make semiconductors is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the most sensitive semiconductors, oh no, those are you can only sell those to private Chinese companies.
Unless you get a license, which will get approved anyways.
Right.
And not only that, by the Commerce Department's own rules, I'm choking on my rage and bile, but the Commerce Department's own rules, if a U.S. company just makes whatever it is outside of the U.S., then they can sell it to China. Any company they want, doesn't matter.
Yeah, the entity list doesn't apply.
You know what this tells me, Shelley? The Commerce Department is full of deep state commies.
I actually don't think that's why.
Why do you think that?
Is there any possible other explanation?
I think the other possible explanation is that the Commerce Department their mandate is to be the Commerce Department, right? Like their mandate is to promote U.S. trade around the world, and they're not equipped to essentially deal with the fact that one of our biggest trading partners is an authoritarian regime.
Well, this is the weird thing because, like, the State Department, the Energy Department, the Defense Department, they all know the risk of China. And, like, they are trying to tell the Commerce Department what they're doing.
And I do think that specifically some people in the Commerce Department know of the risk. Like, I do think that, for example, the U.S. Trade Representative's office has always been better on trade, like on certain things related to China trade, especially since the Trump administration. But like when you have, for example, Treasury or some of the Commerce Department leadership, it's obvious that they're more worried about, promoting U.S. trade, promoting the economy, the money side of the thing. And that's why I'm always very kind of hesitant whenever, it's implied that we should have the finance people set up any part of China policy.
Well, because the Commerce Department's line on this is, well, we're promoting long-term strategic competition with China by allowing all of this trade. It makes American technology manufacturing.
That's not what they said.
Yeah, they did.
No, they said they were focused on long-term competition with China, but they weren't defending the licensing to the. Like, I don't think they had a comment on that, basically.
Well, no, they were saying that, like, their goal is to promote America. I forget what they
the promote American technology thing was a separate thing in the Wall Street Journal article where that person was responding to Matt Pottinger, who used to be National Security Deputy Advisor, saying that the Commerce Department was listening too much to American business leaders when it came to China, because the business leaders obviously don't care about national security. They want to make money.
Yeah.
So the Commerce Department spokesperson was like, oh, we are promoting U.S. technological leadership, and part of that is listening to U.S. technological leaders. So they were defending listening to the business people, but they weren't defending the actual practice of granting all these licenses.
I don't know, it sounds like a lot of hand-waving.
Well, no, I'm just saying that was like a separate issue from the entity list.
Well, anyways, like the idea that they are somehow promoting U.S. technological leadership or long-term strategic competition with China by allowing basically wholesale selling of sensitive technology to the Chinese Communist Party.
I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying that they're not saying this is promoting U.S. technological leadership. I don't think they've come up with any kind of defense for it.
It's because the United States does not have a whole of society or whole of government approach to China. And granted, like, that's very hard to do in a democracy, because a democracy is the way the United States is designed essentially by our founding fathers, is to have checks and balances, which ultimately means competing interests that prevent a sort of authoritarianism, like what the American colony had felt England had become. But the problem is then it makes it very hard to coordinate sometimes on really important issues. But the U.S. can do it because the U.S. has done it on Iran. The U.S. has done it on North Korea. And the U.S. is largely doing it on Russia, although there's many issues there. For example, we still buy refined uranium from Russia, even though we would never buy their oil anymore because that's horrible. But there are the tools to do it. There is the political willpower potentially to make it happen. It's just not coalesced into anything.
Yeah, I don't think that we're at the point where any U.S. administration would be like, we need to stop all trade with China.
Right.
The way we do with Iran.
We're in so deep, right? And so now to do that would cause such unbelievable pain to our economy that
I don't know if that actually would be the case.
Well, I think that's the fear, right? I actually do believe that it would be
short term. There would definitely be some pain.
There'd be a lot. Think about all the pain that we experienced over the last 2.5 years of COVID because of China supply chain problems, right? And it affected different things at different times, right? but like, certain things are really hard to get and whatever. And so you're going to deal with that pain. And then after you get through the pain, it's not going to hurt anymore because
the
of China.
short-term pain is nothing compared to the long-term consequences.
Well, I mean, the
Right.
long-term consequences is essentially a war with China that would be devastating both economically and,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think the bigger problem of not separating from the China trade is that
decoupling.
or decoupling is that when China invades Taiwan, because like if there's still like this unbelievable amount of trade, there's going to be so much political resistance and so much business resistance to supporting Taiwan that it'll be very hard for the U.S. to do what it needs to do.
Which you saw in Europe, since so many European countries were so tied to the Russian economy, there was a lot of resistance to doing anything to prevent the invasion of Ukraine.
Right. And I think there's this excuse that, if Western Europe or if the United States sends actual troops to Ukraine, then we can't do that because then we risk nuclear war. But I don't think that that's actually the main reason. And, this is somewhat speculative. I acknowledge that. But I think that there's a sort of general reluctance to just get in too deep because, ultimately the U.S. still wants to be able to trade with Russia later and do, again, we do have some, not a lot of countries sell refined uranium that we do need for our power plants.
I mean, it is possible to get from Canada, for example.
Yeah. So it's basically between one authoritarian country and Russia.
Shelley, you ready to quit yet?
Getting there.
All right. The pressure's building. Keep at it, Matt.
Yeah.
We got this.
But at any rate, I do think that there's more reasons that are more complex and political than simply fear of nuclear war. And I think a lot of that has to do with business interests and trade interests.